Like some of the other distinguished panelists here today, I'd like to begin by noting the tragedy in Afghanistan this week. 10 journalists killed in a targeted attack by a murderer who is disguised as one of them. I think the President of the General Assembly said that brings the total so far this year, 32 journalists killed worldwide. And I have to say that I find journalists and journalism are today under attack in ways I have not seen in my 20-year career. It's becoming commonplace to go after journalists, to go after their credibility, to go after their rights, to go after their lives. There are different figures out there as far as the number killed last year. A conservative estimate is 46. What we do know for sure is that most reporters don't die covering wars in far-flung countries. They die right at home in their own countries. And the vast majority are targeted killings. Currently, 1 in 10 murders leads to a conviction. Worldwide, that's 10%. That's not a lot. Meanwhile, the number of journalists jailed hit a record high last year, 262, according to the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, to Protect Journalists, CPJ. Now, that is a lot. And increasingly, they're being jailed, as you mentioned, for reporting fake news. And I'm not reporting the old tabloid supermarket woman giving birth to alien babies fake news stuff that you don't like, stuff that you disagree with. On Monday, for example, Malaysia handed down its first ever conviction under its new fake news law. It was a Danish citizen who was sentenced to 1 week in prison and fined $2,500 for posting a video critical of the police. Now, if you consider the potential abuse that this type of law could have to undermine legitimate critical journalism, this is a worrisome new trend. According to the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, CPJ, last year 6 countries jailed journalists on fake news charges compared to 2 the previous year. When you have a free and diverse media ecosystem, it actually does a pretty good job of regulating itself. Some of the best reporting in last year has been journalism about misinformation. How it is spread, how it is used, and that's not something that we saw 2 years ago. Jailing journalists has never really been the answer to anything. When you block a free media, you block the truth. And what fills the vacuum? Lies, propaganda, and disinformation, making it harder for the public to find and verify facts, and easier for them to unwittingly spread those lies. I'm not sure if some of you saw the MIT study from last month about the spread of fake news. It showed that false news stories travel further and faster than real stories on Twitter, 6 times faster, according to the research, which covered a 10-year period on Twitter. Researchers discovered people are 70% more likely to retweet false news, especially about politics, which can undermine democracies and may even influence election results. I should add that the researchers were very careful to use the term true and false news, since empirically speaking, fake news has lost its meaning or all connection to the veracity of a story, as more people, including elected politicians, use the term fake news when they disagree with a story. It's become a convenient banner to distort the truth and discredit the media. And what is the media if it doesn't have credibility? It's true, we get things wrong from time to time, but let's be honest, when it comes to deliberately spreading false information, are journalists really the first group that come to mind? The theme of today's discussion is keeping power in check. To paraphrase CNN's Christiane Amanpour, the difference between truth and lies is the difference between democracies and dictators. Press freedom is critical to upholding the truth. It is a pillar of any healthy democracy. Like the canary in a coal mine, when things start going badly for us, it won't be long before they start going badly for everyone. Because journalists aren't attacked by governments because of what they don't want the journalists to find out. Journalists are attacked because it's because of what the government doesn't want the public to find out. Every attack on a journalist should be seen as an attack on the community, and communities across the world are being targeted. Journalism is not a crime, but increasingly it is being treated that way. And we're not just talking about new fake news laws. More and more countries are redefining journalism as a threat against the people, as extremists, a situation reflected in the record number of jailed journalists last year, as I mentioned earlier. According to CPJ, more than half of journalists imprisoned are in 3 countries: Turkey, China, and Egypt. And according to CPJ, 80% of those in jail cover politics, making it by far the most dangerous beat. Even here in the United States, where freedom of the press is protected by the Constitution, we are not immune to attacks. The U.S. Press Freedom Tracker logs violations against the press and press freedom here in America. And it was started last year partly because President Trump made no secret of his disdain for the media with frequent verbal attacks, including calling journalists, quote, the enemy of the American people. 8 attacked, one of them right here in Queens earlier this month. Tim Fleischer with WABC's Eyewitness News was in the middle of an interview when a stranger ran up to him in the middle of his interview and punched him in the face. My own country, Canada, last year passed a so-called SHIELD law, which was adopted to protect journalists from being compelled to reveal their sources. And this was adopted by the federal government after news broke that some police were spying on reporters to find out who was leaking information to them. One of my colleagues is still being compelled by the courts to reveal her sources. My media organization is fighting back. Providing sources is obviously, with confidentiality, is key to doing our jobs. But I'm lucky. I have the CBC, a big organization with resources committed to journalism. I know that they'll have my back. But 1/3 of imprisoned journalists are freelancers. They are the ones most often risking their lives, and they don't have the same protections I have. It was a Republican senator here in the U.S. who coined the term, "The first casualty of war is the truth." The work that freelancers and citizen journalists do in war zones is invaluable to the work of the United Nations. As a member of the UN Correspondents Association, the UN could support organizations that provide free war zone training to freelancers. Since some states are ignoring UN protections for journalists and freedom of expression, more could be done to make those states uncomfortable, such as a section which names and shames in the Secretary General's annual report on the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity. Reporters Without Borders is calling for the appointment of a UN Special Representative for the safety of journalists, who would report directly to the Secretary General and have the ability to legitimately oversee compliance. This would elevate the issue and acknowledge the vital service provided by journalists. I will close by saying that the journalists that were killed in Afghanistan this week died because they were trying to bring us the story. They were trying to bring us the news, us the footage, us to tell us what happened. They were killed for doing their job. Thank you.
Last week, Turkey sentenced 13 journalists to jail. Turkey is the leading jailer of journalists, surpassing China. How does the United Nations respond when a member state detains journalists, and are those protocols likely to change anytime soon to enhance protections for journalists?
Obviously, certain states are ignoring resolutions, General Assembly and Security Council resolutions calling for the protection of journalists, ignoring Article 19 on freedom of expression. So what the UN has is diplomacy to make the states uncomfortable. The Secretary General puts out an annual report on journalism and impunity. Maybe there's a section there to start naming and shaming countries who don't respect the Charter, don't respect resolutions. That might be a possibility. And you mentioned Turkey. I don't know if some of you in the room may know, but there was another panel which was supposed to take place today, which got canceled late last night, which was supposed to be organized by the UN Alliance of Civilizations. And the group, the nonprofit that was one of the members, that was going to present a video, was told that they couldn't present their video because it was critical of certain countries, including Turkey, Mexico, and it was anyway, they spoke to journalists working in the countries and about the hardships of working there. And so at the last minute, this panel was canceled in the end because the group withdrew its video because they didn't want it to be censored. So you've got an example right here happening at the UN on World Press Freedom Day. So there you go. This is something that maybe states could look at right here.
So you spent a lot of time talking about how freelancers and local journalists are invaluable to journalism, but journalists like Nicholas Kristof or Thomas Friedman are still receiving more promotion and their voices are being amplified. So how can media outlets like yourself, how can they support the voices of citizen and local journalists and media workers in some of these more war-torn areas so that they are being better promoted and supported, for example, like journalists in Afghanistan right now?
Credit where credit is due. I mean, we wouldn't be getting a lot of the information out of certain war zones like Syria if it wasn't for citizen journalists. They are the eyes and the ears of the UN, news organizations on the ground. So you have to give them that credit. Obviously, you use them, you quote them, you give them the credit for whatever information is coming out of wherever it is, Aleppo, wherever it is. A lot of the atrocities, you think, the My Lai massacre, for example, but it would never have been told. It was a cover-up if it wasn't for a journalist. Journalists are key to uncovering the truth, shining a light on what is actually happening. As far as what you can do to promote them, as I said, free hostile environment training, which all of us get at organized at regular news organizations. I think the UN would benefit from investing in organizations which already provide this program for free to freelancers so that they get the same kind of training that we get when we go into war zones. They're young guys, they're trying to make a name for themselves, and young women, and they deserve our protection, they deserve to be quoted, and I don't know if that answers your question, but...
It's very difficult to guarantee freedom, but it's imperative that we all try. Thank you so much for coming to this event, and please come to more events at the United Nations. Thank you.